Picture this. You are a Persian spy crouching in the jagged limestone rocks high above Thermopylae. The year is 480 BC. You have been sent forward to assess the terrifying Spartan army that blocks the path of your god-king. You expect to see iron walls, giants sharpening massive blades, or complex fortifications. Instead, you peer down and see men sitting in the dirt, completely naked, carefully combing their long hair and oiling their skin. You run back to King Xerxes and report, bewildered, that the enemy is acting like women at a spa. Xerxes laughs, convinced that the Greeks have lost their minds before the battle has even begun. But standing next to him is Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king who is not laughing. He turns to the great king and whispers the terrifying truth. The Spartans do not groom themselves for vanity. They only fix their hair when they know they are about to die. What you saw wasn't a leisure activity, it was a funeral rite. Those men aren't planning to survive the week. Before we dive into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please, comment below to let me know where you are watching from. It is incredible that we are exploring these ancient stories together, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity. The truth is, those 300 men were never supposed to be there. In Sparta, it was the season of the Carnea, a sacred religious festival during which military operations were strictly forbidden by law. To march an army during the Carnea was a crime against the gods, punishable by death or exile. The conservative Spartan government refused to mobilize, telling the rest of Greece to wait for the full moon. But King Leonidas knew the Persians wouldn't wait. He knew that if he followed the letter of the law, Greece would burn. So, he found a loophole. He could not take the full army, but the law allowed him to take a personal bodyguard. He dismissed the young, elite cadets who usually held this honor. Instead, he handpicked 300 older veterans. He had only one specific requirement for this mission, a detail that proves this was a suicide run from the very start. Every man he chose had to have a living son back in Sparta. Leonidas wasn't building a tactical unit for victory. He was ensuring that when these men died, their family lines would not die with them. When he said goodbye to his wife, Queen Gorgo, she didn't ask him to come back safe. She knew better. She asked for his final orders. He didn't say, "I love you." He simply said, "Marry a good man and have good children." He was already a ghost. They marched north to the Hot Gates, a narrow pass where the mountains crash into the sea, joining a coalition of about 7,000 other Greeks. It sounds like a respectable force until you look at what was coming to meet them. Xerxes was bringing the largest invasion force in human history up to that point. While ancient historians claimed there were millions, modern estimates put the number at around 200,000 combat soldiers. But this wasn't just an army, it was a moving city that drank rivers dry. They had marched all the way from Asia, crossing the Hellespont on a bridge made of boats. Xerxes had spent 4 years preparing for this. He reshaped the geography of the earth to fit his needs, ordering his engineers to dig a canal through the Mount Athos Peninsula just so his navy wouldn't have to sail around a dangerous corner. He paved the ocean with wood and soil so his horses wouldn't panic as they walked from Asia to Europe. This was the power of Persian logistics. They were an unstoppable industrial force. However, this massive size was also Xerxes' greatest weakness. A force of 200,000 men creates a ticking clock. They consumed food and water at a rate that is hard to comprehend, hundreds of tons of wheat every single day. The land couldn't sustain them. Xerxes couldn't simply besiege Thermopylae and wait for the Spartans to starve because his own army would starve first. He had to keep moving. He had to break through. This puts the Battle of Thermopylae in a new light. It wasn't just a clash of swords, it was a clash of time. Leonidas didn't need to kill everyone. He just needed to stop the clock. Every hour the Spartans held the pass was an hour the Persian beast grew hungrier, thirstier, and more desperate. Xerxes waited 4 days, convinced the Greeks would run away when they saw the fires of his camp lighting up the horizon. They didn't move. Frustrated, he sent a messenger to the Spartan line who pointed at the massive Persian army and gave a simple command, "Lay down your weapons." Leonidas stood at the front of his 300 fathers and shouted back 2 words that defined the Spartan spirit, "Molon Labe, come and take them." To understand why he was so confident, you have to look at the ground beneath his feet. In 480 BC, the pass at Thermopylae was incredibly narrow, a strip of land sandwiched between vertical limestone cliffs and the Malian Gulf. At the middle gate, the passage was only about 50 feet wide. This 50 feet of dirt is the most important character in the story. In military theory, this is called a force multiplier. It didn't matter that Xerxes had 200,000 men, cavalry, and chariots. In a space that narrow, a massive army is paralyzed. They had to come head-on in a column, funneling their vast ocean of soldiers into a tiny stream. At the point of contact, the odds weren't 200,000 against 7,000, it was 100 Persians against 100 Greeks. And in a fair fight, man-to-man, Leonidas liked his odds. The Greeks formed a phalanx, a wall of bronze and wood. The Persians, designed for the open plains of Asia, wore light armor and carried wicker shields. When they crashed into the Greek line, it wasn't a battle, it was industrial slaughter. The Greeks used the othismos, the great shove, driving their bronze wall forward like a bulldozer. The Persians were dying before they could even reach the Greeks with their shorter spears. By the afternoon of the first day, the first wave was broken. Xerxes, watching from his golden throne, jumped to his feet 3 times in terror. He wasn't scared for his life. He was scared because his worldview was collapsing. He decided to send in the immortals. These were the terrifying elite of the empire, 10,000 men who never retreated. But even the immortals shattered against the geometry of the pass. The Spartans even used psychological warfare, feigning retreat to draw the immortals out of formation before spinning around to butcher them. For 2 days, the might of the Persian Empire was held back by a few thousand men and a clever choice of geography. Xerxes was humiliated. But history often turns on the smallest of hinges. A local Greek shepherd named Ephialtes, hoping for a reward, went to the Persian camp. Ephialtes wasn't a monster as depicted in movies. He was just a greedy man who knew a secret. He told Xerxes about the Anapeia path, a goat track that wound through the mountains and dropped down behind the Spartan wall. Under the cover of night, the immortals marched up the mountain. The silence of the forest was broken by the sound of thousands of feet crunching on dry oak leaves, a sound that alerted the Phocian guards stationed there. But in a panic, the Phocians retreated to a nearby hill to make a stand, leaving the path open. The Persians ignored them and marched straight past, sealing the fate of Leonidas. The pincer had closed. The geography that had been their greatest weapon had just been turned against them. Dawn, day 3. The scouts ran in breathless. The Persians are behind us. Leonidas knew it was over. He called a final council of war and did something that proves he was a strategist, not just a warrior. He ordered the coalition to retreat. He knew Greece would need those men for the battles to come. But Leonidas could not leave. Spartan law forbade retreat, and a prophecy had said that either Sparta would fall or a king would die. He chose to be the sacrifice. But he did not stand alone. This is the part of the legend often forgotten. 700 Thespians, led by their general Thermopylae, refused to leave. These were not super soldiers. They were regular citizens who chose to die rather than abandon their allies. Along with 400 Thebans, they stayed. It was roughly 1,500 men facing a tsunami. Leonidas turned to his men and delivered one of the darkest jokes in military history. "Eat a good breakfast, men, for tonight we dine in Hades." They marched out into the wider part of the pass, no longer fighting for survival, but for the body count. In the furious melee, Leonidas was killed. A savage struggle erupted over his body, like a scene from the Iliad. The Greeks drove the Persians back 4 times to retrieve their fallen king. When their spears shattered, they drew their short swords. When their swords broke, the history books tell us they fought with their hands and teeth, tearing at the invaders like wild animals. Finally, the surviving Greeks retreated to a small hillock. Xerxes had seen enough. He didn't want to lose any more men to these demons in close combat. He ordered his army to pull back and sent in the archers. The end didn't come with a bang, but with a whisper, the sound of thousands of arrows blotting out the sun. The last defenders didn't die fighting, they died huddled together, buried under a storm of iron. When the dust settled, Xerxes walked through the battlefield. He had won the pass, but he had lost 20,000 men. He was so enraged that he ordered Leonidas's head cut off and his body crucified, a sign of his fear, not his strength. He asked the exiled Demaratus, "How many more of them are there?" Demaratus replied, "There are many cities in Greece, but in Sparta there are 8,000 more men just like these. The blood drained from Xerxes' face. He had spent 20,000 lives to kill 300. The math was terrifying. The Battle of Thermopylae was a tactical defeat, but a strategic masterpiece. The 3 days bought by the Spartans allowed Athens to evacuate and the Greek fleet to prepare for the Battle of Salamis, where they broke the Persian navy. A year later, at Plataea, the full Spartan army arrived and crushed the invasion for good. The sacrifice at the Hot Gates didn't just save a country, it saved the fragile experiment of Western civilization. A stone pillar was later erected at the site with a simple inscription that has echoed through the ages. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." In our modern world, where safety is often prioritized above all else, do you think the Spartan mindset still has a place, or is it a dangerous relic? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.